I'm going to do is, because there are so many people gone, and because I think it might be a benefit for you to look at this later, which is not to say I don't want you to take notes now, but you can go back to this and look back over it. So I'll attach this video on Edmodo as a link, and you can go back over it and you can play it and listen to it if you want. If you don't want to, it doesn't make any difference to me. It's just there for you if you want to go back over it and take additional notes, etc. This argumentative literary analysis is going to be longer than what you've been doing. It has to be by nature of the prompt. There's no choice. Okay? So let's look at it. It's not just a matter of dissecting it, which is imperative to what you're about to do, but it's a matter of, so how do I do that? I dissect it, but how do I put it back together? What am I expected to do? And so I decided that we'd look a little closer at that, since I don't see you until it's due. All right? So that being said, the most crucial thing that you have to address is, what does this play reveal about the American dream? It doesn't ask you anything about Willie specifically. What is Willie's dream? But you have to analyze that in order to understand what Miller is doing to talk about or to address the American dream. Whether that was his intention or not is not even the point. What does Death of a Salesman reveal to you about the American dream? And this is what makes this argumentative, because it's not the same to every person. We may have the same idea of what we think it reveals, but not necessarily. And so your first item of concern is to sit back, and this is the so what. What does it reveal about the American dream? What does Miller seem to be exposing, or praising, or criticizing, or whatever it is he's doing? What does it seem to say about this American dream? So you have to start thinking things like, what is the American dream? What does that even mean? Willie is simply the vehicle to get the message across. The play is the vehicle, but specifically Willie is. Because Willie has had some expectations of himself and of others. Why? Maybe because of this. What happens to those expectations and those dreams? And why? Yes?
Are we talking about the American dream at that point in time when it was written, or just in general?
That is an excellent question. So, of course we have to look at it in context of time. But there's a reason why this particular story play has endured. Because, in a sense, it's timeless. Because when I originally asked you the question about the 1940s and the 1960s and all that sort of thing, it was to put this in context. Is it the same or is it different? But at its core, the initial idea of the American dream, why people came to America in droves in the 1800s and the early 1900s, why Ellis Island was packed to the gills, was because you could work hard and that work would translate into success. That was the idea. You could come from nothing and become a success. If you worked hard, it would pay off. In other countries, especially in caste systems, etc., you could work as hard as you wanted, but you were in a certain class and you weren't moving out of it. And so the idea behind America and that dream that it offered, the opportunity that it offered, is that work hard, succeed. So maybe that's part of what it reveals to you, that it's changed. It could indeed be that. It could be that it doesn't even exist anymore, that it's a fallacy. It's not even true. There isn't even any American dream anymore. We all just try to survive. So it could reveal any particular thing as long as you can substantiate it. That's why this is argumentative. So What does it reveal about the American dream? That it doesn't exist, that it never did, that we have our eye looking in the wrong direction? If the American dream is about success, what is success? Remember those initial questions I asked you to think about, the 4 questions. Happiness, family, money, career. Is success having a great career, making lots of money, and living in a big house and not having worries about bills? Is success having a happy family? Is success being happy with your life? Is it some combination of it? Which part of that is the American dream? The American dream used to be a family and a white picket fence. And suddenly it's about mansions and cars and things like that, impressing other people, perhaps. Maybe it's always been that. I don't know. How does the reader, that's you, look at this compared to other stories about that dream? Of Mice and Men, Gatsby, Raisin in the Sun. Didn't we talk about these in class the other day?
Yeah.
Generally? Okay. So that means you have to look at what the dream may be, what this play seems to reveal about it, and how that compares to other pieces that you've read. So now, you not only have to decide what is being said, but how that works in relation to another piece or pieces that you've studied in the past. There are multiple layers. So then that comes down to organization, right? Oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do first, and how am I going to attack it? How am I going to organize it? Well, you can't compare it to anything until you've decided what it is. What is the message? And how does that message compare with the message of other things? Of Mice and Men. What's the message about the American dream in Of Mice and Men? Just quickly, topically, easily, without much discussion. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. The dream for George and Lenny was what?
Farm with rabbits.
But yes, that's the literal. That was their dream. But the comment by Steinbeck is what? People like that are never going to succeed. It's futile. They worked hard, but it wasn't going to happen. From the very moment, from the title, you know it's never going to happen. Dream, dream, dream all you like, and some of you only get to be dreamers. Gatsby, what does he want? Initially, what does he want?
Wants to get the attention of cigarettes.
Via
Mansion parties.
money. Money impresses people. That's what's going to win her over. That's the kind of girl she is. That's what's going to win the love of my life. That's what's going to make me happy. And I'll impress other people at the same time. That's a completely different dream than George and Lenny's. Does he succeed? He succeeds in what many people call success. He's got it all. Except the one thing that'll make him happy. So which part of it was the American dream? Okay? So I don't necessarily think you have to dabble in all of them. I think you should pick one and stay solidly on it. So these considerations that are here, Miller's concept of the American dream with tradition, those are suggestions. You don't have to address that. Well, here's what I think Miller is saying, and here is what the traditional dream. You don't have to delve into that. You can dive right into what he seems to think, but you have to kind of do some defining of that dream in some way or another. Do you understand the word subverting? Did anybody look it up? Gavin?
To undermine.
To undermine. To say, to take away its credibility. Is he saying it's all a farce? It's a hoax. All that stuff you're doing, it's for nothing. Is he saying the American dream is non-existent? Or is he just looking at how it affects us and the way that we spend our lives and what we expect of ourselves and others? Because look at what Willie expected of himself. Look at what Willie expected of Biff. Was Willie's dream money? Was money what drove him? Did he ever complain about about having a great big not having a great big house? Did he ever complain about money? They have nickeled and dimed all over the place. We have to pay this bill and that bill, but it's not that he was always wanting money. He wasn't the bank wasn't his thing. He said, "I used to make this much money," but that's not what drove him. Reputation. People used to love me. Acceptance and reputation. Admiration. Loads of friends. Even the cops would watch my car, any street. Everybody loved me. Just like everybody loved Biff. He's a great guy. Great ball player. Scholarship, respect, admiration, reputation. Dad, I'm a loser. No, you're not. Don't say that. That hurts him more than anything. I'm a fake. No! It's really not about money. But something drove him to have those expectations of himself and his son. So that's something different. That's a different kind of success than maybe we think about. Sometimes people are more concerned with the esoteric, the superficial, the outside, than the inside. If I look like I have a lot of money, people will think I have a lot of money, and they'll respect me. As long as they don't see my actual bank account.
Me.
Okay. Is Miller a cynic? Do you know what a cynic is?
Like they hate what they're doing.
Essentially pessimistic. Do you think he's looking on the negative side and ripping it up, or do you think he's being realistic? Okay, so that will help you. So this might help you decide if you're realistic or cynical, or positive. You might be very optimistic. Okay. And then we get to Cheyenne's question as something to consider. Do you think that Miller's tone is relevant 2017? Why are we still reading this piece? And is it antiquated, or is it more pertinent than ever? Does the idea of happiness ever change? Do people of different backgrounds have different expectations? What does Arthur Miller do? How does he do it? And what does it tell us? Let's see. Staging. That's the name we talked about yesterday. Staging. Why aren't there scenes in this play? Why are there no scene numbers? What does that mean? You're right. What does it mean?
So you can't tell.
You have to address the use of non-realistic and realistic time, experience. We're not quite sure when reality and when his fantasy and psychology is kicking in. What's really happening and what's not? Where's the line between reality and fantasy in this play? We're not always sure. And neither is Willie. That says lots of things. Has this expectation, has this pursuit of something had taken this toll on his sanity? It caused him to take his life? Yeah.
So what is, like, from what you've, like, if the way, like, someone wants to answer this prompt, they, like, really, really believe in it, and and it's, like, a really deep message, too, and in order to, like, accurately convey that to readers, they have to use many words. Like, this essay is not supposed to be very long. It's supposed to be, like, to the point, right? And so if it would take, like, links for me to convey what I want to convey, how would I also address those without just, like, being like, and then there's this, and then there's this too, and I'd be skipping over.
So some of the things we talked about yesterday, I'm not skipping past your question. Some of the things that we talked about yesterday were the fact that this might go against what you've learned much. I did lots of research last summer because I wanted to make sure that the way that I was presenting information and the expectations of an AP course were in line. And there are many an AP teacher that believe that many argumentative analyses must include first person thought. You don't have to say I think, I feel, I believe. You can still state it directly as fact. But there is going to be more opinion involved in it. This is not going to be a 5-paragraph essay. An argumentative analysis of this depth, especially when you're taking argumentative literature and you're putting it together, it is going to be longer. So the typical 1.5-page typed, not even 500 words is not going to be enough. That's so. You can't dabble. You have to dip all the way. Like, shoot, you can't go dibble. You have to jump in and get deeper, or you're not going to get to the level of analysis.
So is it okay if it's long?
If it's what, long? Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
In this essay, about whom should you speak the most?
Miller.
Right. Miller. Not Willie. What does Miller do? He creates a character that so-and-so. How does he do that? This essay should have much more to do with Miller than Willie. Or Biff. Should Biff be included? Absolutely. Can you get away with one paragraph in your comparison to another story?
No.
It would have to be a long one, right? One or two? So you first have to establish your intro and your thesis. You then have to talk about that thesis insofar as what your revelation of the American dream via this play is. What does Miller do to make you feel that way? How does that compare to others? And so what? So in my estimation, if you have and then your conclusion. And if you have any less than 7 paragraphs, I don't know how. I don't know how you can do that adequately. At this point in your life, you need to stop counting paragraphs. And I say that with love. You've got to stop counting paragraphs and start listening to what you're saying. I found myself talking to a parent yesterday, and we were talking about a kid who you could sit down with and have a great conversation about a book. Like an interesting conversation about a book. Won't write an essay. Can't do that. And I just started to think, why doesn't the kid just sit down and write out his side of the conversation? Because that's all the essay is. It's your side of the conversation. Here's what I think. It's like you getting to talk without me interrupting you. That'd be a great idea. You always say such great things and I want to respond. The truth of the matter is, the essay is simply your side of the conversation. So are you going to be the uninteresting person? Or are you going to be the interesting person and say, oh, here's what I learned and here's what I think and here's why I think that, without being interrupted? Or are you just going to go, yeah, the book was okay and here's what I read? Because that's what you're giving your teachers. I already know the story. Don't tell me the story. I know it. Tell me more about how it's done. what are the building materials? If we went to the art museum, which I'm still working on, I'm thinking if I can squeeze it in at the end of the year after the exam, it'll be kind of our fun release if we can go after May 3rd. If I say, okay, look at this piece of art. How do you do it? Don't tell me what the scene is. Don't tell me what's there. Tell me how it's done. Broad brush strokes, tiny brush strokes, multimedia, acrylics, blended colors, bright colors, diffused colors. You know, tell me how it's done and how it makes you feel and how come it makes you feel that way. The only difference is this is a book. You got to look at how it's built, the materials it's built from. Yes.
So, how does one differentiate between like the what and the how? 'Cause that's kind of like what confuses me.
Okay, so in case you didn't hear, how does one differentiate between the what and the how? Excellent question. What are is the element, okay, the elements used, imagery, that confusion and blend of non-realistic and realistic time and space. Literally the elements used. How or what does he do? What does he do? He creates characters that. How does he do that? Okay. So what does he do? The specifics, the literary stuff. How does he do it? How does he blend that all together to evoke whatever he's trying to evoke? I go back to those 3 questions. They're better. I worded those questions better. Or those statements. They were questions, okay? The A, B, and C. Those are the best to look at than just this. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so see if I can bring it back or if I closed it up. I closed it. We'll let this come up because it'll be the right one, and then click on Edmodo. Thank you. See where it is?
Computer stuck.
Sometimes it comes back up to the right page. Go ahead.
Does it?
Okay, let's go.
I don't know
Yeah.
how
Whoa, Mama.
I'm doing it.
Next one.
Okay. Go back to these. How do we think? How do we feel? What's our reaction to what's being done? That's the first level. You read something, you're angry, you're happy, you're sad, you're confused, whatever that is. You disagree, you agree completely. How does the writer do that? Well, because he makes this character so frustrating or so familiar by so on and so forth. And so what? That helps us to realize that all of us are just beating our heads against a wall or whatever. Okay? These 3 questions, I hope it becomes somewhat a mantra to you so that every time you're given a write, this is immediately what you think. I hope it becomes even more than that. Every time you're given something to read or something to look at or something to think about, you immediately say, you have to be in tune with what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And then, wow, how did they make that happen? And why am I supposed to feel that way? What is that artist trying to get me to feel and why? What's their point? Yeah.
One of the issues that I kind of like feel like I'm having already trying to start on this essay is like with the topic intertwining with one another. I feel like I don't want to be like repeating something constantly throughout the essay. Like I don't know how to not be repetitive.
I feel that too, cause it's like
my answers are
coming up with all the points to make.
Topics, because I feel like some of the topics can be similar and have like similar answers. And I don't want to be like constantly repeating what my answer is.
That is organization just in general.
Okay, Gavin and Grace, do you have any advice given anything we talked about yesterday? I felt like it was a productive conversation, and I wish I remembered all of it. You know things that happen in Titan time. There's stuff coming at you, and so did you write anything down? Did you have any insight based on our conversation yesterday?
Well, it wasn't that like all the things that she lists here you had to necessarily like address and like prove. It was that they were helpful suggestions that I mean not just like suggestions that you can just blow them off in the wind. Like you should probably address them, but it's not like you have to specifically like address each and every one, like a list. So if they do kinda have similar answers, you could like combine them in a way or something.
I see the suggestions that said cynical or realistic, they go hand in hand. Most of the suggestions go hand in hand with each other, so you'll be able to answer both of them with the same answer at the same time. So, is the subject and tone still relevant today? Compares back to, is it cynical or realistic? Is it something that we still feel? So, with organization, I say don't panic too much because you're probably answering the same thing when you're answering it that one time. Just try and wrap it in together.
Yeah, and like the essay, it's not about proving each one of those. Each one of those is to prove the big one. So, yeah. Just like use what you feel is truly necessary to deliver what you believe the American dream is and how Miller presents it.
And don't forget to include your points. You don't have to substantiate your points. They're yours. You feel a certain way because of either your personal experience or because of things that you've watched happen. That's valid. But state it, instead of saying, I've seen, just state it as fact. This has happened. So you're taking I and that first person out of it, but you're leaving your experiences in it. Okay, so my idea, jot down everything that you think, address everything that you think is necessary to address, and color code it. Where are the commonalities? These things go together. I'm putting them in pink. These things go together. These are yellow and whatnot, and then organize it in that way. If they seem to have a commonality, they seem to go together, then organize them that way. So let's do a very big chunky thing. I'm not talking about paragraphs, I'm talking about parts. Okay? So obviously part 1 is your intro. It does not have to be elaborate. As a matter of fact, when you're in the exam, if you even have an intro, you're probably wasting time. You have to dive right in, addressing the prompts, and have your thesis or whatever it is that you're using to make your points. But you're not going to have some hook and some interest and build it. There's no time for that in 40 minutes. You already know that. I gave you an hour for the last one, and and you probably needed more time to make them what you wanted. Okay, so you got your intro, which includes your thesis. The first thing that you need to do is define, I guess, to use a quick term, the American dream, and specifically what you believe it connects to your thesis. What is revealed? Well, according to what I believe, this is what's revealed. And the rest of the paper is going to show how you think that happens. So your thesis contains your general revelation, and then you move into the more specifics. Now, do you think you should go next to how Miller does that specifically? Or do you think you should go next into the comparison to another piece? I'm asking. Here's what I think is happening. Here's how I think Miller's doing it. Here's how that compares to another piece. Go ahead.
Do the how and then do the comparison after the how.
I think so too. Because if you stick this chunk in here, then it breaks up what's happening. Like here's what I think about it. Here's how that compares to others, and here's how Miller did. Like that doesn't make much sense. So you should probably keep this together. This might take 3 paragraphs. That's why I'm saying this is chunks and pieces, not the paragraphs. Then the comparison. We've left out something really important. It's an argumentative piece. You must address some counter argument.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are you going to do that?
At the end.
Before the
I feel like after the
That's what we did the BBQs, right? You have to put a conclusion, right?
What?
You would, like, that would be your last, like, thing you would address before the conclusion, right?
So if I did that, up here I have the intro to my paper, including my thesis. Here's what I learned about the American dream based on what I've read. Here's what I've always thought it was, or here's what the world thinks it is, or whatever. Here's what it traditionally has been, however you're going to address it. And Miller blows that out of the water, supports it, whatever it is that you're saying. Here's how he does it.
You could also put it before the how, because
I think before
like
the comparison.
this is what some people think, but Miller disagrees, and this is how he disagrees and what he believes.
Yes.
I was worried about that because, I mean, now that it's been explained, I'm not, but I was because I thought it was more effective to establish your argument wholly, then introduce another one, so that, like, the person has your thought in their head first, and, yeah, they're more likely to.
So what we often teach, I promise I'll call on you, what we often teach you is the very simplistic method of argumentative writing, which is my point, counter argument, end.
Yep.
It's very chunky and it's very simplistic. It is much more real and it is much more authentic, that's what I want to say, and it's much more sophisticated to weave it in multiple times. You weave it in. You don't just throw it like a chunk that you threw in at the last second. Oh, by the way, I have to have this paragraph. You weave it in a bit, and it's much more real. Like if you're having a conversation with someone, and you're dialoguing, and you're saying, here's what I think. Well, but it's much more realistic to weave it in. So, weave it in up here. Maybe what you once thought it was, and as you've aged, or as you've watched your parents, or as you've read more things, or watched more news, or whatever, you see that this is a shifting, changing, or non-existent ideal. Steinbeck doesn't even believe in the American dream, hence of Mice and Men. There is no American dream. We're never satisfied. So how can we have this dream if we can't be satisfied? We finally get what we said we wanted, and we don't want it anymore. We want more, and then 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 we want less because all that more is driving us crazy.
That's why it's called a dream. It never happens.
Who called it that in the first place? Anybody research that? Who set us up for failure? Probably a teacher.
Yeah.
Alright, so more confused, less confused.
More confused.
Kevin, ignore all of this and go home.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Okay.
And now
So you have at least some more direction. I think organization is probably the most confusing part of this.
Yeah.
And remembering that you have to talk about Miller, not Willie.
Millie.
No, don't even call him Millie. Okay?
Willard.
This should not be so extensive. Nor should this. You need to spend much more time on the thesis and on this stuff than trying to snowball somebody up here. Oh, I'm going to write this amazing essay and you're going to love it and it's going to be all about this and then bloop, 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 and wow, wasn't that awesome and da 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 da, because that's what happens. You got this, oh, can't wait to read it, it's going to be good. Wait, where's that part you said was going to be great? Alright, so that's not a put down, I promise. It's just that we get lazy in the part that's hard. So, remember, these are not paragraph numbers, these are sections, chunks. This should probably be, especially if you're weaving in arguments, etc., definitely a couple of paragraphs. You're talking about cynicism or realism. What is the dream? What do some people think it is? What is Willie's via Miller, or Miller's via Willie, sorry. How does he do that? How does he stage it? How does he make it happen? How does he make us see and feel those things? This is a tragedy, remember?
Oh dang, forgot about that.
A once noble or at least semi-admirable character has done something that leads to literally his death, his complete downfall. A false sense of hope, a false sense of success, unrealistic expectations, denial, some kind of blindness, failure to see what's really happening, failure to accept his shortcomings. What? What's his flaw?
My question about the organization is, would all these chunks be about one thing, then we get another chunk of it which is about another thing, and then another chunk that's about all thing, and it's got all 5 of those really in it.
Here's what happens.
Well,
Here's how Miller makes it happen. Here's how that's different from what Steinbeck said and did. Steinbeck's version, in my opinion, let's just think of Mice and Men. He's much more real and simple. Shakespeare, that's too much English one. Steinbeck writes at roughly, and I'm not talking about all the words, but I'm talking about overall, if you do a Lexile, he writes at about a 5th to 7th grade reading level. Simple language. In that book, there's only one dream sequence at the very end. If you ever read the book instead of watching the movie, the whole rabbit thing at the end, it's very simple and straightforward, and it's dark, it's unhappy. They're all the underdogs, and they never win. We're supposed to assume that Willie had a shot, that Biff had a shot at it, but their ideas were in the wrong place. George and Lenny were destined for failure before they started, because of who they were. That's a whole different idea of the American dream. Some people, it doesn't even matter, you might as well not bother. Okay? That's completely different. And look at what Fitzgerald does with Gatsby. It's glitzy, it's glamorous, it's a whole different perspective.
And with Raising the Sun, it's just
It's based in a whole different class system. It's more hopeful. At least it doesn't end in tragedy. So choose one of those and look at how they're different. There's a dream in Raisin in the Sun. Is the dream realized? That depends on which dream you're thinking of. Any other questions? Comments?
Like, kind of what, because the comparison, would that also, could that possibly weave in a rebuttal with the comparison?
Could you weave in rebuttal into the comparison? Absolutely.
You gotta be able to smash them. I read this one thing, it was like, if you don't think you can do an effective mic drop after your conclusion, it's not correct. So, that's my pretty much.
Think mic drop. Alright,
drop.
note to self.
Think Obama.
And there! Okay. More direction. You can't write this paper at lunch.
God, no.
We're not allowed to bet.
I'm scheduling in my mind what I'm gonna do.
Okay, y'all. Thinking like I don't know. Okay. There you have it.
Oh, okay.